Welcome back to CBS News Election Night headquarters in New York. It is now 1:30 in the morning. And just in from the data desk, CBS News rates Pennsylvania as lean Trump. Keystone state there, leaning Trump, as we have just about 94% of the vote in. Doing well, Donald Trump doing very well in rural areas, and there's still some vote to be counted in the Philadelphia and Pittsburgh area, the cities there. Let's take a look now at the blue wall. This was the easiest path to victory for the vice president, Kamala Harris. Michigan still a toss-up at this hour, but those two other states that the vice president would need if she were going to take the blue wall strategy, Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, at this hour, CBS News rates them as lean Republican. As we had mentioned, her path to victory has narrowed significantly. Here's the electoral vote tally at this hour. Trump with 246 and Kamala Harris with 194. And you can see there, Pennsylvania still in white, Michigan still in white, Wisconsin still in white. Minnesota, we've also not called. And, of course, Nevada and Arizona states we're looking at very closely. Let's check in with Tony Dokoupil at the Palm Beach Convention Center in Florida, the site of Trump headquarters tonight. Tony, I know you have been there all night. It seems like the crowd has erupted in cheers a number of times, given that this has been a positive evening for the former president.
Good evening, Nora. I said at the beginning of the night that everyone here knew one thing for certain is that it would end in tears one way or the other. Tears with a loss or tears with what they say would be the greatest comeback in political history. It appears by the feeling in this room that it is the latter. While we were in commercial break, we're saying lean Republican for Pennsylvania. Meanwhile, Fox News, which is playing on the monitors here behind me, they have called that race for Donald Trump. And when that moment happened, it got loud in here. There was a roar. There was reverberations. The phones came out, and the expectation is that the phones are going to stay out because our understanding from the poll report is the former president and possibly now next president is on his way to this location. He is expected to speak. We've seen some evidence of that planning going on behind me. They've got the Make America Great Again sign, Trump Vance on the front of the podium. They've come out to raise the teleprompters up a little bit higher. And now the question becomes, if Donald Trump does appear on that stage to make remarks, which Donald Trump do we get? Do we get the Donald Trump election night 2016 version or 2020? In 2016, just to refresh people's memories, he was incredibly magnanimous and gracious. He said we owe a debt to Hillary Clinton for her service to the country. He reached across the aisle, asked for guidance from non-supporters, said the time had come to bind the wounds of division. That was the tone on that night. Of course, 2020, a very different mood. What will we get tonight? That's one of the questions. The other thing we're all chewing through right now is what went wrong for Democrats tonight. Why were they unable to capitalize on what seemed like some momentum in the final week? I put that question to some of the Donald Trump supporters here in the room, just saying simply, Democratic heads are exploding all over America. How do you explain what happened to them? A couple of the quotes I got from people is, look, Democrats have lost touch with everyday Americans. Beyonce doesn't pay my bills. Democrats turn their back on us, and if you turn your back on us, eventually we're going to turn our back on you. It's a wake-up call here. That's the feeling in the room for Democrats, as Trump supporters who've been here for now 7-8 hours are awaiting that final moment when a call is made and they get an appearance from their political hero, Nora.
Tony Dokoupil at the convention center. We should note that the former president has not been there. He has been at his home, which is just right across the bridge, Mar-a-Lago, from the convention center, where he has been entertaining some of his most prolific donors, as well as the world's richest man, Elon Musk, who has been a strong supporter of Donald Trump, a man who also has billions of dollars in contracts with the Pentagon for defense contracts and many different things, and has been a strong supporter of Donald Trump in many ways. And they've been pictures of them that have been put out on the internet. And I want to ask you, Robert Costa, how would you describe their relationship, the relationship between Donald Trump and Elon Musk?
It's Donald Trump at the center. It's the former president who is now comfortable with the levers of power. When he was elected to the presidency in 2016, after covering him for so many years, it was one of the only times I've ever seen shock on his face when he won in 2016, standing in that hotel in New York, because he wasn't prepared for the presidency. He now potentially enters the presidency once again fully comfortable, and he has allies around him who are reflecting the total ideological shift, a new paradigm in American politics. It's the nexus not only of Elon Musk and Donald Trump, but Donald Trump Jr., Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tucker Carlson. What we're seeing tonight is potentially not just the victory of a political campaign, but the emergence of a new power structure in the United States that does not go on red and blue lines, Republican or Democrat, or even so-called nationalism or populist lines. This is in the image of Trump, with his instincts driving everything. Musk, of course, will want to work closely with the president on defense policy, foreign policy, technology, financial policy. But to be clear, based on our reporting and my conversations with Trump and others, it's him who's driving everything. And those around him, including Musk, I'm told, are highly aware that he comes into this presidency, should he win, as someone who is now seen by the Supreme Court as someone who can operate with total power on many fronts with his official acts, and will want to use that power and likes having that power.
Yeah, there we see Elon Musk jumping on the stage. I mean, Elon Musk just today said to his 203 million followers on Twitter, go to the polls and vote for Donald Trump today. Did that clearly make a difference for him? This whole bro code thing that we keep hearing about.
There's an erosion of institutional trust in so many places in this country that have fallen away. You could trace it back to the bank bailouts in 2008, how the Iraq war decision was brokered almost 2 decades ago. So many Republican voters in particular have lost trust with the legal system, the political system, the news media, and they see in Elon Musk and his X platform and Trump, as I said, this emerging power structure that they are comfortable with. And this is, if Trump enters the White House once again in 2025, it's a new America will be covering, because Trump is not just enacting tax cuts, that will be part of it. Mass deportation's part of it, but it's a new framework for how someone conceives the presidency itself.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, Robert, one of the things that I think of, and I've never been able to shake from my memory, is what the Intel chairman, Senate Intel chairman Mark Warner, said about Elon Musk. No single person is more beholden to the Chinese Communist Party because of the business interests he has in that country. And I hear that time and again from lawmakers who say, because of the exposure he has, you hear him very critical of Western governments, of European governments supporting Ukraine. You hear him very critical of the Democratic government here. You hear nothing about China. You hear nothing about Russia, and deep concern that he is influencing so much. And it's one of the things when we were talking about sort of the way you look at this realignment that's happening, one of the things you hear from people in the tech space is that the world's moving too fast and government's not keeping up with it. And that's kind of the message Elon Musk has brought into the Trump campaign with these public statements he's made. And John Paulson, the former hedge fund manager who's being rumored as possibly being looked at as a Treasury Secretary in the Trump administration, where they say we're going to undo all sorts of regulation. We're just going to cut things and move fast. That's not how our government is built. In fact, it's intentionally not built that way. There are supposed to be backstops. But Elon Musk is selling this idea and presenting as part of the Trump campaign that they're going to remake America.
As we think about what, since the night seems to be going so well for Donald Trump, you think about what this means for him. Winston Churchill said there's nothing so exhilarating as being shot at and missed. All the legal challenges Donald Trump faced, not all of them, but the federal ones, they go away. And I don't know what the New York judge is going to do about that sentencing, but this brings a wonderful, by Donald Trump's lights, legal windfall to him if he wins tonight. And that's got to be part also of the mindset of how he enters the next presidency. There's not just the immunity that the Supreme Court suggests he has for things that he does in office. There's not just the wonderful feedback he's getting for basically following every one of his instincts and having it affirmed by the voters. But there's also the significant legal peril that has now dropped, that will drop away if he wins.
So, John, what happens to this concept called checks and balances? Because if he gets in, he has the House, possibly the Senate, the Supreme Court. What happens? It seems that he would be in power with no guardrails, so to speak.
Well, I would add one more thing, which is what we saw in this campaign, which was different than 2016, was there were a number of members of his party who actively, buried memories of January 6th, who reinterpreted what he said in order to help him. There's been a conditioning over the last many years, but certainly within this campaign of those in his party to, row with him. We see the senators who are elected tonight, they will owe their success to him. So it's checks and balances is one question, but you also have, it's not just Donald Trump. There is a political movement now that is that has practiced at supporting whatever his impulses, wherever they may send him.
And nor even the way we do politics in this country is going to come into question. Because what were we spending so much time focused on the last few days? But, ground game and knocking on doors and making phone calls may not matter anymore. And we don't have full grasp yet on what the digital work that was being done by the Trump orbit looked like.
Well, the information space has changed so much.
Because because the algorithms of journalists don't necessarily line up with the algorithms of the voters they were reaching. And so it's almost impossible for anyone to track what anyone else is getting. And we just don't know what was the kind of information they were getting a year ago targeted at them, what may or may not have been true, and what was the more explicit campaign message that was arriving in their feeds over the last several weeks. It's going to require a completely fundamental rethought about how you campaign for office on a national scale and on a statewide scale if this is what happened tonight.
I want to bring in our CBS News political contributor, Joel Payne, to weigh in on this. And Joel, how do you see this potential realignment?
Well, look, I think the conversation you're having matches the sober conversation that's happening all over the country with Democrats and state parties and at the highest levels of the party. Look, I think there are some who still see a narrow path for the vice president, and I think it's important to say that there is a narrow path, but it is narrowing by the hour, as Major said earlier. But I think Democrats are starting to take stock of what's next. And what's next includes adjusting to clearly a changing electorate and a changing country. And maybe reassessing some of the things that we think are important. Ed talked about how you organize a campaign. Clearly, some of the tried and true campaign methods that Democrats leaned on, the organization, the 3 whatever million door knocks over the last weekend, it can only get you so far. Last thing I'll say, it's very clear to me that in the last 2 years, Joe Biden never recovered from what happened with Afghanistan. It was destabilized by an economy that was stubbornly not cooperative with Democrats, frankly. And then I think Gaza kind of delivered a destabilizing blow. And when you add those things together, I think this outcome that appears that we're headed to tonight is maybe less surprising, but not less disappointing. And I can tell you there are a lot of vulnerable communities, particularly in the Democratic coalition, that feel very, very insecure at the moment. And want to also say that as well.
I appreciate that, Joel Payne, and also want to bring in now Leslie Sanchez on that issue. And Leslie, how do you see this realignment?
I think the realignment, you can't discount how frustrated these voters have been for a very long time, and many of them felt unheard. And whether it was looking at kind of alternative media or they're, trying to find somebody else that sympathized with the way they were feeling about their pocketbook and their financial situation, I think Donald Trump tapped into that. When there's a lot of conversation, you're talking about Elon Musk. Elon Musk spent a tremendous amount of time talking about freedom of speech, freedom from censorship. And in many ways, this is a populist, working class, middle class America that wants those, Gail's word, guardrails removed so that they can have less government interference and continue to thrive in a strong America. that's where they feel left out. And I think that's what it's tapping into on both sides. And I think Democrats and Republicans kind of, the traditional Republican Party, reconcile this is a new party and a new way, and it's deeply diverse. And it will continue to be, I think, for the next several election cycles as Trump continues to redefine the Republican Party.
Leslie Sanchez, thank you.